Today on TSHL 101, we're joined by Edward Rogers, who is the Deputy Speaker Pro-Tem of the Texas Silver Haired Legislature. Ed brings a deep well of experience from his years working in the fundraising world of nonprofit organizations, experience he now channels directly into strengthening the mission and reach of the TSHL. He has been a driving force behind several key resolutions this session, each aimed at improving the lives of older Texans and the communities that they call home. His work ranges from ensuring Medicaid fraud recoveries are reinvested into rural hospitals to addressing the environmental and safety concerns of abandoned, uncapped, unplugged oil wells to improving standards for nursing home medical directors through certification requirements. Ed's perspective blends practical experience, fiscal responsibility, and a strong commitment to community well-being, and we're really looking forward to exploring the impact of his resolutions today.
Ed, good morning. This is Gary Gerstenhaber.
Good morning, Gary. At the outset of all of this, I want to thank you and Mr. Emmert, and of course our colleague Mike Taylor, for collaborating on this radio opportunity for TSHL. I appreciate this chance to kind of share some thoughts.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for our listeners who may be meeting you for the first time, tell us a little bit about your background in nonprofit fundraising and how those skills translate into your work with the Texas Silver Haired Legislature.
I was just talking with Mike beforehand. We were talking about a grant application, or actually an investment opportunity for a major business in Austin on our behalf. And it made me think back to my very first fundraising effort, which was in the early 70s in Mike Taylor's neighborhood in Northeast Tarrant County. I was working for a youth serving agency, and my fundraising goal was $3,000. I thought, my gosh, that'll take about 30 gifts of $100 each, that was kind of the base plate for a community gift to a nonprofit 50 years ago, and it that grew into what eventually grew to an annual campaign in the Austin area as the vice president for the United Way campaign in the late 80s, which totaled about $5.5 million. So everything in between there, from youth serving to hospital development, United Way, a medical school relationship, university fundraising, and a program at A&M, also the Junior Achievement franchise in Fort Worth. So lots of a great variety of individual, corporate, and foundation fundraising, special events, annual events, capital campaigns, all of those kinds of things that are necessary to make for successful nonprofits across the board. Texas is a great place for private sector nonprofit fundraising, and that's one of the things that attracted me to my role with TSHL.
Okay, well, as Deputy Speaker Pro Tem, what responsibilities do you carry, and how do they shape your approach to the resolutions you champion?
Well, it's interesting when you talk about the kinds of things we do in TSHL, which is basically education and advocacy of policy alternatives to change the lives of seniors. When you have 5.5 million people in the state that you're talking about, there's a lot of corporations, trade associations, and professional societies that are engaged in those areas. And when we develop a resolution related, for instance, let's talk about backup generators for nursing homes. Well, there's 1,200 nursing homes in Texas. They all have medical directors. They have 12,000 or so Texans living in them, and policy directives that change their lives and improve their lives make an impact every day in every community, from Houston, Texas to Paint Creek out in the middle of West Texas. So that is the impact of what we do, and that doesn't come at a small price. We have an operating budget of over $100,000 a year. Most of it is self-funded by our TSHL member legislators who are volunteers, but we've got to have outside support to kind of defray the cost of the things that we do. And that's something that ties together well with all of these organizations and the resolutions that we adopt.
Now, one of your resolutions focuses on Medicaid fraud recoveries and how those funds should be redirected to support rural hospitals. What is it that led you to take on that issue?
Well, this will be no surprise to you when I tell you this, but when all of the things hit the news in the northern part of the country back earlier in the year, actually a year ago, on Medicaid fraud, I began to think, well, I wonder what kind of situation we have here in Texas. And when I began to look at that and do some research, the Attorney General's Office, Medicaid Fraud Control Unit, identified over $125 million in fraud, in Medicaid fraud in Texas in 2025 alone. Now, all of those were the recoveries, and those go back into the general fund at this point and have for the duration of Medicaid's history. At the same time, we are the state with the largest number of rural hospitals simply because we have 200 rural counties in the state, and most of their patients are Medicare and Medicare patients, and a huge portion of them are Medicaid beneficiaries as well. Rural hospitals don't receive the same Medicaid or Medicare reimbursements as urban tertiary care hospitals do. So they're on the verge of financial imbalance on a constant basis, even in cities that you wouldn't suspect that would be the case. And I thought, well, you know what, that to me seems like a great way to take bad money and make it good and make a difference in the care and the reimbursement to hospitals for every Medicare and Medicaid patient they serve out in the hinterlands of Texas. I did connect with the Texas Organization of Community and Rural and Community Hospitals, and that's a professional association of those entities. And he, of course, said, well, that is something that if it were introduced as a resolution, we would surely be behind that.
You also did a resolution on injection wells. Could you define what an injection well is and why it's relevant today?
Well, what happens in the oil patch when fracking is the process to pull oil out of the ground, in order to pull the oil out of the ground, the fracking practice injects the pipes with water and other chemicals to force the pressure and through the cracks in the area where the oil is, and it brings it up out of the water, out of the ground. This produces huge numbers of what's called produced water. And in many cases, that has to be put somewhere and stored. It can be reused if it's stored in injection wells, and later on could be brought back out and could be reused and remove some of that chemicals and things that are used to force the pressure and the oil out of the ground. However, what's happened is these injection wells, which are basically empty or abandoned or unplugged wells that we addressed during the last session, they've begun to erupt and are contaminating water supplies, especially in the Permian, but really all across Texas. 140 counties in Texas, which is 60% of the counties in Texas, have unplugged and uncapped oil wells. Many of them are being used for these injection wells to store this produced water. Unfortunately, the supervision and the regulation of those injection wells that are causing the problems with brine flows and things like that are polluting aquifers all around the state, those are not being managed very well by the Railroad Commission. And they acknowledge that it's a challenging situation for them.
Who would be responsible for paying for that cleanup?
Well, in most cases, it would be those companies that have the injection wells under their jurisdiction. So there is a paper trail, as they say, for that. And the problem is just the regulation and the monitoring and things like that is not as strongly administered as it needs to be. That could be a staffing shortage. I think that's probably the main culprit, because the oil industry does not want to have these kinds of bad players out there. We found that out in the last session with the unplugged and uncapped oil well project, which ended up with $100 million going to the Railroad Commission to instigate some stronger regulation of those issues. So the industry, there's only so much they can do with the bad players. And in many cases, I think it's just a situation of needing additional apportionment of funds. The law is there. They're just not being monitored very well.
So,
Yes.
so Ed, is this a compliance issue that needs strengthening, or is it? You said the industry said it's a difficult or a challenging situation. Why would they be saying that when they have all the remediation capabilities?
Well, as I said, when I talk about the industry, I'm speaking mostly from the standpoint of the trade association. There's going to be good players and bad players, and they recognize that. In the last session, when I testified before the Utilities and Natural Resources Committee of the House, the executive director for the Oil and Gas Association said, "We support your resolution, Representative Guerin, and we don't want the bad players out there. We want them to be disciplined. We want them to be responsive to the requirements of maintaining these wells." It's exactly the same thing here. It's just kind of the next generation of issues.
Another resolution that you're bringing forward calls for certification requirements for nursing home medical directors. I was surprised that there aren't any. Why is this an important step?
Well, all of us know that today the people that are going into nursing homes are sicker than those that went in nursing homes 30 years ago or 40 years ago. 30 and 40 years ago, people didn't live past 65 or 70. Now you've got 70 and 80 and 90-year-olds in nursing homes. So their conditions are much more challenging for treatment and management in these skilled nursing facilities than previously. There are about 1,200 skilled nursing facilities in Texas, and there are 200 certified medical directors who have gone through a certification with the Post-Acute and Long-Term Care Professional Association nationally, which has a certification program. Texas currently lacks a mandatory specialized credentialing standard to ensure physicians possess the specific competencies required for their settings. With only 200 certified medical directors and 1,200 facilities, there are many that don't have this certification present. Last session, this resolution was turned into a bill during the last session with a representative, a state rep from Sugar Land, who himself is a certified medical director. And he wrote the bill. He's a medical director for 4 nursing homes himself. And the bill didn't make it out of committee. So we don't know what kind of restraining factors there are, but we believe that this will be an issue that needs to be handled. That professional society has done research, and there has been independent research that indicates that where there is a certified medical director present, there's a 15% improvement in independent quality scores for that skilled nursing facility. So the quality care part is the primary outcome that this resolution or a bill would produce.
You think the other issue is that if there's only 200 physicians that are certified covering 1,200 nursing homes, it seems like that's kind of a problem to begin with.
Well, as I said, it may not be as big a problem as we think, because in the case of Dr. Lalani from Sugar Land, he himself is a medical director for 4. That's probably not an unusual situation. They're not on the bill in the building all the time. It's not like they're the hospital administrator. So, perhaps those 200 cover, I don't know, let's say half, maybe 600 or 800 of the facilities have those certified medical directors. present. This bill or this resolution came from a colleague of mine from Mike and my old hometown, North Richland Hills. He was a graduate of my high school, as Mike was. And I was playing golf with him a couple of years ago, and I said, Paul, what could we do to improve the quality of care in our nursing homes in Texas? Because we're sitting here with the egg and the snake running through it with the boomers hitting that age group, and it's just going to be a bigger challenge moving forward. And he said, Ed, it would be a certification of medical directors. And Paul himself is one of those. He's in Andrews, Texas, and he's only the medical director for that one skilled nursing center. It's 100 miles to the nearest skilled nursing facility. So, I mean, Paul's kind of he's kind of a lonesome light out there in West Texas.
Might be nice to add that to the APRN statement that we're trying to push through as well.
Well, I talked to Paul about that as well. There are a number of statewide associations, including AARP, Texas 2036, the APRN Association, TSHL, that all support the full practice authority for APRNs. Something like I may be wrong, but my memory seems to recall that there over half the states have full practice authority for APRNs.
Yeah, I think the count was 31 last night.
There are a lot of these resolutions across the board, all 61 of them. We kind of throw that up against the fan of the 48 contiguous states on who else does this, because it's a reference point, and I think that's important.
Well, that brings us to the end of tonight's episode of TSHL 101. Our sincere thanks to Ed Rogers and Mike Taylor for joining Gary Gerstenhaber and myself in this important conversation. Their insight and dedication continues to strengthen the work of the Texas Silver Haired Legislature and the communities that they serve. Next week, in part 2, we'll continue our discussion with Ed and take a deeper look at how the TSHL functions as a research and advocacy arm for the Texas legislature, which represents 5.5 million Texans. That includes 20% of our rural population who are seniors. This is a role that matters and one that grows stronger when more voices are involved. As always, we want to remind our listeners that your involvement makes all the difference. Whether you share your personal story with a TSHL representative, support the work in your community, or even step forward to become a legislator yourself, every action helps shape better outcomes and a better quality of life for all older Texans. The more who participate, the stronger the advocacy becomes. To learn more, visit tshl.org and join us again next Tuesday at 6:15 p.m. for a new episode of TSHL 101. And thank you for listening, and thank you for being part of the work that moves Texas forward.